All right, everyone, thank you so much for your patience. So here in the Oval Hala, we're turning now to the incredible example of courage and resilience that our colleagues in Ukraine have shown over the past 15 months following Russia's full-scale invasion of their country. I'd like to welcome Sevgil, Olga, and Katya here to tell their story and the story of Ukraine. And I'd also like to welcome our moderator for this session. We're very honored to have Lise Doucette, who is the BBC's award-winning chief international correspondent and who has spent much of the last year reporting in Ukraine. She's going to take us through this conversation with three really courageous examples from Ukraine. So Lise, thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone here. There's lots of seats in the front. You know, we've been talking about this, impersonal AI, all this. We want a little bit of personal. So why don't you move so we can see you? These women have come a long way in great difficulty from the battlefields of Ukraine. They want to see you and feel your presence. Thank you. Please come, lots of seats in the front. We'd like to make this as engaged and interactive as possible. There you go, Charlie. What a relief it is. So many of the sessions this morning have been talking about that faceless AI, that animal that either we're going to tame or is going to terrorize us. But this session is going to be about, of course, a bit about technology, but about that good old-fashioned face-to-face journalism in the heat and the dust. And arguably one of the most difficult and dangerous kinds of journalism of this kind is covering a war. And it's most difficult and dangerous of all if that war is being fought in your cities, your streets, even the rooms of your own homes. We are very, very privileged to have three very, very busy editors, all of them courageous, all of them committed, all of them female, hashtag just saying, actually, just accidentally not on. I'm just going to tell you just a little bit about each of them, even though we don't have much time, because even their stories tell a lot about their commitment to journalism. Sevgil Musaiva is the editor-in-chief of Ukrainska Pravda. Pravda, of course, means truth. They launched an English version of their publication after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia in February of last year. Her journalism has moved with the times in Ukraine, from Forbes Ukraine to the Euromaidan protests of 2013-2014. She helped to launch Hubs, a separate business portal, when Russia annexed Crimea, where she grew up in 2014. She was also a founder of an internet project called Crim SOS. And that is when she became the chief editor of Ukrainska Pravda. Last year, she received the prestigious International Press Freedom Award from the CPJ and was recognized by Time magazine as one of the 100 most influential voices. Thank you very much. Welcome. Olga Rudenka, chief editor of the Kyiv Independent, was also recognized by Time magazine. We have some real award-winning as one of the next generation leaders. And she also won a Women of Action Award for the women in Europe. Olga used to be in the Kyiv Post. She was the deputy to the editor-in-chief. And some of you, if you're following Ukraine, you know the story of what happened when the Kyiv Post in 2021 was taken over by an owner who wanted softer coverage of the government, who was led by some comedian turned politician named, what was his name? Zelensky? They were all fired, and they went on to set up the Kyiv Independent, and Olga was unanimously chosen to be the editor-in-chief. They went from 30,000 Twitter followers in February of 2022, and now have 2.1 million and counting. Thank you, Olga. Last but not least, Katya Segorskova, editor-in-chief and co-founder of Zaborona Media, right? Zaborona Media. Also co-founder of the 2402 Fund, which is a Ukraine journalism emergency fund. They have a terrific mantra: freedom has eyes. Needs eyes. Freedom needs eyes, even better. She reported for a wide array of Ukrainian and Western media. In 2014, she received the very prestigious Kurt Schork Award, and she was also awarded for her coverage of the Russian-speaking fighters working with Islamic State. We want to use this session to find out a bit about the challenges they now face as journalists on the front line. We also want to use it as a session, since there's a lot of solidarity at these meetings, to find out how we can all work together to strengthen this journalism and ours in covering this war. So a year and a half since the full-scale invasion by Russia, there are, of course, challenges of safety, security, challenges of financial support, challenges even of sadness, of losing your loved ones, losing your friends and colleagues, and challenges even like electricity outages. Let's start with you, Olga. Would you say now is, we can talk about other challenges, the top challenge that you face now for you, your journalist and your journalism in Ukraine?
Thank you. Well, you very rightfully mentioned some of the key challenges, and I think for us at the moment, one of the biggest ones is the challenge to find strength to persevere 1.5 years after it started, because the first year you kind of were able to get through it on adrenaline and the shock. But then we had, as you mentioned, this exhausting winter of blackouts, and now we're in the second year of war, of full-scale war, and it's about, where do you find the strength to continue? And it's also like, as you said, there's a lot of accumulated sadness and trauma and stress from everything you witness, including like the stories, but also something you witness personally, people being killed and so on. And it's just accumulating. And we were just talking yesterday with Sergei actually about how we need to have a vacation, but it's impossible to imagine, being on the seaside or something right now. And it's a huge challenge of how do you unwind from this? And I know that we need to, because we need the strength to continue. This is not going to end in the next month or two. And it's, where do you find the strength to do this?
Where do you find the strength? I mean, it would be good to sit on the seaside. Coffee. Are some of the journalists saying they need a break, they need to get away from journalism, or?
No, actually, the challenge I have is I can't push my people to take vacations, because they feel so, they're going to miss out on something very important if they are away. And it's a challenge of, also, how do you manage the team? There's no textbook for doing this. And it's as well as another, in the Obrona and Ukrainska Pravda, it's a very young team. It's a very young team that is reporting on the war in their own country. They are in enormous stress and coping with a lot of difficulties mentally. And how do you navigate it? It's a challenge every day. And for me personally, I find strength in them. Actually, just seeing these people who are younger than I am. At 34, I'm like one of the oldest people in the organization. Seeing them being so motivated, seeing them fighting for the right things, and especially now, when we are talking for the past, 15, 20 years about how journalism may be dying or whatever, or changing it into something, and whether journalism is even needed. Seeing these people in the early 20s who are so devoted, so dedicated to the core principles of journalism, that's so motivating.
Wow. So, I think we all hope that you will find some strength here with your colleagues from around the world. So since you were just discussing the other day with Olga this very, very issue, what for you as an editor would you say is one of your main challenges now?
Okay, I will mention maybe two things. The first one, of course, the atmosphere in your newsroom, because people are terribly affected by war. And you're absolutely right that we lost our loved ones. Unfortunately, even in our newsroom, two of our colleagues, they lost their fathers, for example. One was shot dead in Bucha last year. Another one went to the army and he was killed by Russians in the front line. One of our colleagues decided to join the army. He's a brilliant videographer, but that time he decided that maybe he's more citizen than journalist, and it was his choice. And you have to recognize this choice and respect this choice. So people are terribly affected, so we have a lot of discussion inside the team. And the second one, pay attention on what's going on in Ukraine still. And among our population, I mean Ukrainians, because people are terribly tired and affected by war as well, and they avoid to read news how it was before. So I want to mention that in the first months of war, of course, the coverage was so high, and people read news like every single moment. I remember like numbers of views in March or April last year, it was high. Now it's less. Of course, people avoid to, because they also choose kind of mental health, expect like knowing what's going on in the country. And it's hard to keep attention, for example, on war crimes, first of all, and which is important, still important, and to in international level and in national level as well. That is why we had a discussion on our team. I decided to organize conference on May, and actually a few days ago, the first Bucha journalism conference took place in Bucha. And there were two main goals why we decided to make. First, just to have this self-reflection and reflection moment for journalists. And more than 400 journalists from different local medias, international medias, national media attended to this conference to have a discussion about kind of self-censorship, trauma, how to cover a war zone, how they work during this year, ethics, which is also a very important topic. And we didn't have a discussion, we didn't have time to discuss the question of ethics, for example, which is one of the most important when you cover, for example, war crimes, when you speak with victims, with survivors, and when you cover, for example, such places like Bucha. And our colleagues who covered Bucha, for example, from the first days when Bucha was deoccupied, they shared their experience, and it was important. The second one, to pay attention on what's going on, because, like last year, Bucha was kind of a tipping point of this war for journalism and for international coverage as well. So, and it's actually changed the way of this war, because before we were thinking about maybe peaceful agreements, etc. After Bucha and after what we saw in Bucha, thousands and thousands of civilians who were killed, even in Bucha. 442 people were killed by Russians, and it means like every six person in Bucha were killed by Russians. Now war crimes are not so. We don't have attention on war crimes even in our country, but it's important to keep attention, and it's important to tell this story. And we were thinking about how to tell this story again and how to pay attention for these different accidents and different stories we had last year. And it helped actually people to understand better what they want to focus again, and it was useful in perspective of, first of all, reflection. We do need more reflection to speak out, actually, and that's why it's important to listen Ukrainian journalists in international fields in this beautiful conference as well.
I saw, some of you may have seen the big banner. It was very powerful. I think, Charlie, you were also there. The Bucha, I think Bucha has become the symbol of evil. And it's interesting because this morning when we were discussing artificial intelligence, it was mentioned how Bucha was an example of it was journalists on the ground and so many Ukrainian journalists who went and saw with their own eyes. And from that, people then went to forensics and the investigators, etc. But it was mentioned as the importance of the power of journalism. It's something all journalists want. We all want to feel that our journalism has impact. Did it help your colleagues in going? I mean, I know it must have been painful to go to a conference described as Bucha up in big letters, but did it help somehow to strengthen their resolve in the sense of knowing that as difficult as it is what they do, it is making a difference?
Absolutely, absolutely. This is about importance of journalism, and I think that Bucha recognizes the importance of journalism. Before, in Ukraine, it was popular conference Межгорье Fest, which was more about anti-corruption issues, because it was also the tipping point for Ukrainian journalists when Yanukovych escaped the country, and journalists celebrated the kind of the impact of their work, that it helped to change situation in our country. And Bucha was the same tipping point for journalism and for Ukrainian journalism and for international journalism. You know, I spoke with people who escaped Bucha before Bucha was deoccupied, and they actually told me that a lot of people were killed, but we didn't have evidences, we didn't have enough information about it, we didn't have footage. And that's why maybe, unfortunately, those people were not heard by international community and journalists as well. They were speaking about it, but unfortunately people believe when you see this, like when you watch this video, when you see these photos, and it actually what happened in Bucha. And it changed completely the understanding of war. It changed maybe also attention to situation with weapons, because we need weapons to protect our civilians. We need weapons because we have to deoccupy our territories, because before that, of course, all Ukrainians in occupied territories under danger. And after that, after the occupying of Bucha, it was absolutely understandable for everyone and clear for everyone in the world, like for all civilized world.
Katya, I'm sure you've been listening to everything and thinking, well, yes, I agree with that, but for you, for your media, for you personally, your main challenge, it may be similar to what we've already heard.
Well, I can agree with the words that Olga and Sevgil said. Of course, it has an impact on mental health of journalists, of course, as well as on millions of people in Ukraine, basically. And I guess the war impacted on mental health across the globe, not only on Ukrainians, because this war is crucial for many people. But what I wanted to say about challenges for journalism like a profession, because we still want to be professional during the war, but we appear to be journalists in the free country, pretty democratic country, with a war censorship. And this is pretty challenging thing, because you think like a free man or free woman, like a free journalist who still pretty much want to investigate things in your own country because you really care about your country and the process that are going on there. But you have this censorship. And you hear like every day that you cannot say about this and that. You cannot, for example, publish pictures of the rocket attack right after the attack, because Russia can use it for the second attack, and we've been witnessing it many times. So you can agree on some of these restrictions, but then you see that Telegram channels, social media, different bloggers actually publish this stuff. So they're not journalists, and they do that. So you imagine that you as a journalist has a different responsibility. And this is like we really think about that a lot, because it has an impact on your coverage, and colleagues from international newspapers and TV channels usually ask Ukrainian journalists, are we still professional? Are we, can we do our professional job during the war because of the censorship? Do we have self-censorship while covering the war? And we are constantly thinking about that. So this is kind of a process that we have every day in the newsrooms and among the colleagues. So we have this war censorship in one hand, and in other hand, we have a very deep, very interesting situation with the audiences, because sometimes your own audience can become a censor for you. They can ask you not to publish things because they find them dangerous for their countries. In Ukraine, we have very active, even proactive audience. And they can tell you that it is not the right time to publish this photo because it can, it can affect something, maybe something on frontline or whatever. And you, as an editor or journalist, you have to think about that. Is it really the right time to publish it, or you should hide it for some time and publish it later? So this is kind of a challenging thing, as I said. So it is really like working as a journalist in Ukraine. It's like you're locked in the room with a tiger like on your right side, and with a snake on the left, and you just, only thing that you can do is just sing to them, just make them sleep a bit, and then you can do your work while they're sleeping. So that's how I feel.
A tiger and a snake never sleep. If I could follow up on that briefly, I want to tell a short story that I've never told publicly, and that was like my little self-censorship moment. It happened in 2014. In 2014, when the war actually started, when Russia invaded Ukraine, and Russian troops were still posing as proxies, trying to frame it as an insurgency or something in Ukraine's east. And the beginning of the fighting, which was still at the moment called anti-terrorist operation in the east of Ukraine. So there was a moment very early on, in like one of the first months, maybe the second months of the hostilities in 2014, when there was some sort of a standoff between Ukrainian troops. It was, I think, a Ukrainian volunteer battalion, and some locals in one of the eastern cities, and apparently somebody was hurt. There's something like, like a little pro-Russian protest that was dispersed or something like that. It was some standoff, and it got physical, and somebody was hurt. Civilians were hurt, and this is my first experience with any of it. And I'm at the moment working at the Kyiv Post, and I'm probably like I don't know, 25, something like that. And so I have this moment of, oh my God, if we report that, it's gonna make our guys look bad. It's gonna make our troops look really bad. So I pull my my editor in the room, and I tell him all my concerns, and I say, I think maybe we should just stay away and not report it. And thank God, he was an experienced editor, and his response was basically, are you crazy? We're reporting it because it happened. And that was my one pill for, against self-censorship that still works to this day, and that was 2014. And as Katerina mentioned about the audience asking, I had this recently, I had an email from a reader who said that we are traitors because we revealed a possible location of one of the Patriot systems in Ukraine. And I had, of course, a little panic attack, and I looked at the story, and the story was actually just citing an official video published by authorities that showed basically which brigade was operating the Patriot, and we mentioned in the story this brigade, is like in this area, is in this general area. So I replied to the email explaining that. It was a short reply, and the guy got back to me basically saying, "Thank you, so much respect for your work, all understood." And it was
no apologies, right?
So unusual.
It's a simple but powerful phrase. It's the essence of journalism. It happened. Katya, but it's been a year and a half, and I noticed that in all of your media, some stories are now coming out about corruption, about other stories, and you're not holding back. Do you find both the outside censorship but also the self-censorship is changing the longer the war goes on?
Yeah, actually, I think
that happens. That happens in all the wars that continues for too long, because in the short phase, you just. I mean, it goes as it is, but then some political changes actually change the course of restrictions on journalists or press freedoms, and people get used to the war and the rules of war, because I guess we have some rules, inside the newsrooms as well, like how to cover something. So yeah, when the war started in 2014, there was many new media appeared in Ukraine, because it was a kind of a rising of media freedom, I would say, even though there was a war, but it was crucial to report on that. So many journalists started their own news outlets. And now in 2022, I see the same protest, that many new media started to appear in social media, not only on websites, in YouTube, whatever you can find it, and now I guess people in Ukraine has also this war fatigue. Journalists really tired of covering the war and living in the war situation, which is also affect your coverage. So it became it getting more complicated, and we see that officials they create new restrictions on press. For example, recently they created a kind of zones for the front line where journalists can or cannot go. So I find it pretty complicated, because you have to deal with the restrictions, and you cannot go to some cities in Ukraine and report on what's going on there, even though thousands of people live there. So this is pretty complicated, and this started just a few months ago. So yeah, I think that we have some issues with that, and we constantly fighting for the press freedom, which is really important during the war, because I think you guys who are at this conference and who really follow the news from Ukraine, you really need this coverage from Ukraine, from international correspondents, because you also are affected by the restrictions. BBC, CNN, all the media from around the globe, when they cover Ukraine, they deal with Ukrainian authority in that. So yeah.
So it's all about protecting the journalism and protecting the journalists as well. All of the sessions are ending up, we don't have no time for questions. I want this to be about your questions. I'd like there to be a conversation. And I see people in the audience who cover other wars, Georgia and Afghanistan, right in the front rows. So let's open it up to questions, and I'll give all of you more time to, when you stand up, please say who you are, what country you're from, or what media you're from, so we can have an exchange. We want to learn from you as well. But keep the question short so we can have good up. Yep. Do we have a microphone? Yes, here in the front row. Yep, here. This.
Hi, Leif Lundsmann, Nordic Journalist Center, based in Copenhagen, Denmark, working in the Nordic countries, which is Sweden, Norway, Finland, Iceland, and Denmark.
The quietest countries.
We have for 60 years provided education and exchange for journalists in the Nordic countries, but we have recently been given the mandate to expand the concept of the Nordic countries to include Ukraine.
Really?
So we are now able to provide some forms of support and education and exchange between Nordic journalists and Ukrainian journalists. We're not allowed to provide weapon, money, or equipment, but when it comes to, say, seminars, exchange, education, mid-career training,
Smoked salmon,
methods,
wine,
etc.,
restaurants.
whatever. But please tell me, which are the basic needs? Which are the needs? How can we best provide support to your struggles and your work as journalists?
Thank you.
I mean, I'll start. I think, well, the first things that come to mind, well, there are two things. First, as Sevgil mentioned, a lot of journalists are very, very exhausted. And exhausted. Everybody is very exhausted.
Tired.
And if there is any possibility for, I don't know, to accept people for some sort of like short-term retreats where they can come and to like have a change of environment. And maybe if it's, you know, I mentioned I'm having a very hard time pushing my journalists to take vacations, but maybe if it has an educational component in it that is related to the profession, then it will be easier to make them do it. And that's going to be really good for just, you know, for mental health. And second, a lot of media in Nordic countries are very experienced with their business models, membership models, and so on. And there are many media in Ukraine who are now trying to do something like that. So if there is some exchange of expertise is possible, like one, you know, we at the Kyiv Independent, for example, really benefited from some mentorship that people from The Guardian provided to us. Just like some Zoom calls where they went through our membership system and pointed out some flaws and gave us ideas. We really benefited from that. So things like that can be very useful. That's me.
Yeah, I totally agree with Oля. So more about mental health and support of Ukrainian journalists. I think that also these things like conferences are very important too for self-reflection and reflection. We didn't have a time before just to have even time to discuss among ourselves. And I think that kind of camps for journalists or some retreats for journalists from different local medias, for example, and national medias would be interesting and useful. And of course, financial support. I mean, what Oля mentioned as well. So the Kyiv Independent has absolutely wonderful example of how readers in different countries can support the media. So you have a lot of subscribers and patrons. We also launch our Patreon, and if you have this opportunity to support Ukrainian media, please do. It's important. It's important in perspective that like people still follow us, people interested in Ukraine, and people want to follow, want to kind of support our work.
So you're on, just to be clear, you have a site on Patreon which raises money for your journalists.
Yes, absolutely. And it helps us also to provide to cover war from different perspectives, because, you know, like coverage from front lines is very expensive, really very expensive. You have to find everything just to go to the front line, and front line reporting is very important too.
Thank you for your question. You know, I have few answers actually. One is how basically international newspapers and those who do, you know, who cover Ukraine in different newsrooms across the globe can help. I often see that many journalists come to Ukraine to cover it. And Ukrainian journalists often help with that. And I really think that it would be great if more Ukrainian journalists who know everyone in the cities in Ukraine, that their voices will be spread in the national newspapers more than we have now. In the beginning of the invasion, we had opportunities to tell our stories in international press, but now I see the less of it than it was before. But I think, I find it really powerful when you can tell stories from your own countries about people who you know and about the history of the country that you really know. So yeah, this is one point. Another point is that we are here kind of nomad journalists, editors who own online media. We live in digital world, so it is easier for us to somehow to make changes in our reality. But in Ukraine, there is still a power of local small newspapers, which we often we often forget about them because they are very local and they are very concentrated on the local population. But they have a real power of the word, of printed word, and they appeared in the situation that nobody helped them, nobody support them, and it is it would be really great to also look at this direction and try to understand how you can be helpful in these really local newspapers. They have communities. They have this sense of sense of community, right, between people.
That's a it's very, very important point. It hardly needs saying here, but I will say that credit where credit is due to recognize the work of Ukrainian journalists. And I'll use this moment to say that there is still the use of the word fixer. And I know people use it for the right reasons, but sometimes we don't use it in Western newsrooms. We never call a producer or a junior journalist a fixer. Some Ukrainian and Afghan other journalists are called fixers when they have journalism degrees, when they're doing most of the journalism. Really would be progress if we even phase out that word fixer and let's all call each other journalists as we should.
I will also add the question of insurances for international reporters and for Ukrainians. Insurances are becoming so expensive, even for international media. So you can imagine that for Ukrainian media is almost unbelievable how to pay for insurance for your journalists, for example, to and for international is really expensive too, and that's why a lot of foreign medias also decided just maybe we don't need this story from the front line, from Ukrainian front line, because it's extremely dangerous. Like 58 journalists were killed in Ukraine, like all who decided to fight and who decided just to on duty. So, but 11 were killed on duty. So 11 journalists were killed in Ukraine from the start of the full-scale invasion, which is an enormous number. And that's why, unfortunately, it's absolutely understandable that a lot of foreign media, they don't want to risk. And
Thank you. Hasib, yeah. Microphone.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. So I work for VOA. I manage the Afghan service there, and a number of you alluded to how you have to strike a balance between
Your
safety.
Name?
Yes, safety and...
Hasib Al-Kozai, yes.
Oh, sorry, Hasib Al-Kozai. I apologize. My name is Hasib Al-Kozai, and I work for VOA. So I am interested in how you utilize citizenship journalism, UGCs, and how you vet them as an alternative to get the voices out, whether you face challenges like deep fakes or fake videos planted by authorities to kind of cast doubts in your credibility? And the second question is, how do you strike a balance between safety and getting the news out? You often have to make that decision, as we do in Afghanistan.
Okay. Now we have 6 minutes left. I'm going to take one. Those are two really good questions, and I'm just going to take this one here, and then we'll let you choose between. Yes.
Okay. This is a fairly simple question. I'm John Yearwood. I am an editorial director at Politico and former chairman of this great organization, IPI. But I wanted to. I was intrigued by the answer to the question about the mental issue and what's going on there. And in the United States, I'm a member of an organization where we provide mental breaks for journalists. So if you are interested in coming as far as the U.S., I'd like to talk to you after the session so that maybe we can get you involved in what we do there.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Ken Choi from Joseon Daily Newspaper in Korea. Your First Lady, Mrs. Zelensky, came to Korea last week, and your President, Zelensky, went to Japan several days ago. I'm just wondering how their visits, 7,000 kilometers away from home, fared among the Ukrainian media, and how it is shared among the populace in Ukraine.
Did you all cover it? Yeah, of course. Yes. So we've got a question of safety versus the story, which is really important. UGC verification. Thank you very much for this offer. And did you cover the visit? So good.
Okay. Of course, we covered the visit because it was one of the main line stories for the weekend. I think that of course we covered, and it was extremely important for us. Before President Zelensky visited the United States and Europe, and it was his first visit to Asia, which is very important and in question of support of Ukraine. The second one, safety we see story. I have only one suggestion. I speak with militaries before. My journalists go to the front line, and I have the kind of a discussion: is it safe or is it not? And then there are some even I want to protect my journalists. That's why I ask even press officers, could you please tell that it will not work that time, and then after 2 days, Oля, for example, our war reporter, can come to this place, because for 2 days it will be more dangerous, and for her, it's hard to understand that okay, it's dangerous, you don't want to go. That's why I ask press officer, please, could you give her permission in 2 days after this battle will end? So, but don't tell her.
Thank you. Okay.
Well, as for the visits, we don't cover them that much because our audience is mostly in the West and they read about it from other sources. But these foreign visits of Zelensky are a good opportunity to get something newsy out of him, because there is usually a briefing and he actually answers questions, something that he very rarely does in Ukraine, because he's actually very close for Ukrainian journalists.
It's close. He doesn't meet them.
No, he doesn't. He hasn't given any interviews to Ukrainian media since the start of the invasion. He only talks to foreign media. And I understand the prioritization, but at the same time, there is virtually no opportunity for Ukrainian people to have media as their representatives ask something from the president, which is not ideal. As for the safety issue, well, the problematic thing is that there is a lot of unpredictability in this war. It's an artillery war. It's very, when some positions are hit, it's not even, in the first weeks of the invasion, when several journalists were killed, we were talking a lot about how Russians seem to be targeting journalists specifically. And now it's very, when positions are hit, it's very undiscriminating, and so everybody gets killed. And the military is often very reluctant to take in journalists for that reason, because they don't want to be responsible for somebody getting killed. The problem is that I usually have to make these decisions about whether to allow a certain trip to the front line or a certain trip to some positions while I'm sitting in Kiev in our office, and I also don't have real experience of frontline reporting myself. So I have to make these decisions operating very limited amount of information. And whenever choosing between, a riskier and less riskier version, I'm always inclined to choose the less risky version, even if it means not getting as good of a story, because I firmly believe that no story is worth a human life. And yeah, so I'm always push them for the less risky option, which is sometimes difficult because they're young journalists who are very adventurous and are very fearless. And I respect that and admire that, but they need to be sometimes, they need an adult standing behind them and pulling them back and saying, no, you don't go there.
Well, that is breathtaking, and I think if it's, the media I work for, the BBC, has a whole staff of security people.
And that's one of the things we in Ukrainian media don't have any security staff. When you see a report that comes out on CNN from somewhere in eastern Ukraine, you should know that there is. I mean, you all know, of course, but the audience doesn't know that there is a team of like 10 people there. There are so-called fixers, there is a journalist, there are one or two cameramen, risk advisors, the driver, they come in 2 cars and so on. And when there is a report from the front line in Ukrainian media, there's usually 1 or 2 people, a journalist and a photographer.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And just,
sometimes we can ask the help of volunteers and militaries, and actually, but they help us voluntarily. We can pay for that, for example, and of course we have some talks with them before we are going to the front line, and it's important. It's important. I think that it works all the time with for example, Ukrainska Pravda coverage.
Could you, like the question, because I know you get involved in verification, UGC, what's fake,
actually, I wanted to say that we created a 2402 fund in the beginning of the invasion, just to make sure that journalists will be safe on the front line. We basically bought bulletproof vests and helmets and everything to help them, like those reporters who work from the front line. And now we are focused specifically on risk assessment and how to, we train journalists on how to go to the front line and not being killed there or injured. So it's a training program that we have, and it really helped hundreds of journalists already in Ukraine to make them sure that they will be safe. And now we'll be also focusing on mental health issues, because the request on it is huge, and everyone wants to know how to be with these issues during the war. So yeah, I think this issues it is not as bad as is in Afghanistan, basically, I would say, but still there is a big issue with risks in frontline reporting. I'm reporting from front lines myself when I'm not doing my editor things, but yeah, it is not as bad, but still we need to train journalists, because in the beginning of the invasion, thousands of Ukrainian journalists became war journalists. Yeah, we often say so, and it's true that we need to train them to work in new conditions.
we have a control czar too at IPI, and his name is Scott, and he's looking at me, because there was one hand in the 4th row and one hand in the 1st row. Okay, so we'll have a question and a half, but only very quick. Have to seem to be fair. This gentleman first. You'll be quick, and brilliant.
I'm John Danishevsky from the AP, and I just wanted to put a plug in for the ACOS Alliance, a group that Charlie and I helped found in 2014, because they will help you provide insurance for journalists And also, we do training for assignment editors in risk situations. So I think we need to have a conversation with someone, and other needs. And I'll just say very quickly that I'm a big advocate for international news organizations like the AP to hire Ukrainian journalists, and an AP team just won the Pulitzer Prize for public service for its, and they were all Ukrainians.
Mariupol coverage was amazing. Charlie, last word, it better be good.
Yeah, and thank you, John, because that's half of my half question. So I have a quarter of a question. I'm Charlie Sennett. I'm the founder of the Ground Truth Project. I'm also part of the IPI North American Committee. And I was just in Ukraine with Seb and Olga, and I was at the Bucha conference. It was extraordinary. So congratulations for the journalists coming together and taking a moment to support each other. It was powerful. It was really important. Local journalism in Ukraine is something I'm really interested in. At Ground Truth, we support local journalism initiatives. We're proud to be in partnership with Ukrainskia Pravda. We want to do more of that. So local journalism, we want to invite it forward. But my question is to you, Olga. I think you said something very powerful. Zelensky has not done any press conference with a Ukrainian journalism team.
Not because I mean, Ukrainians can go to the press conferences, can't they?
Yeah,
and they do ask questions there.
These briefings in Ukraine are very, very rare. They sometimes happen after visits when somebody comes. But and there's been one or two press conferences.
There were two.
It was.
There's, I think,
the last one was in anniversary of war, but it was for foreign reporters and for Ukrainian journalists.
It was a mix, and the foreign reporters got
Yes.
Yeah.
And the last interview we had, like an interview for 5 media, was, if I'm not mistaken, the April of, it was last April, so 2022.
Yeah, it was a group interview to, was it to TV channels, or was it to TV channels or to?
No, it was like
group of.
I was
think
a part of
there.
So
Okay.
the question
Yeah, sure. But he hasn't given an interview to Ukrainska Pravda, for example, which is the biggest news outlet in Ukraine, and it's. If you want my opinion, I don't think it's right, because I think the Ukrainian people should be able to ask questions.
The question would be for IPI, for all of us, what can we do to try to put a message into the international community, and even one that Zelensky might see? That really
tweet it after you finish this.
That really encourages.
Talk with him.
Yes.
Really, what role could we play in a letter or some form of a public statement saying this is an opportunity for President Zelensky to really reach out to his own journalists and his own media to be more open to talking with them and hearing their questions?
That's a great question and a very difficult one. I don't.
Twitter storm.
I want to be.
Yes, Twitter storm. Yeah, hashtag.
I want to be an optimist, but I don't think that he would really be impressed by a message coming from journalists in that regard. At the same time, what you can do is keep the issue of press freedom in Ukraine, like in your coverage, keep it alive, and that way it makes it into the different conditionalities that EU and US have for the Ukrainian government. And it's not just about talking to Zelensky. I'm not craving an interview with Zelensky, to be honest. But what I'm craving is equal access to the front line and accreditations and other issues like that. And they are very important. And the situation right now is pretty fragile, because it seems to me personally that now the government in Ukraine is kind of trading their way, trying to feel how many freedoms they can take away from journalists, and will it fly or not. And it's the Western governments who can tell them, no, that it will not fly, who can make it part of the conditionality. And it's journalists who can keep it in their coverage and to make sure that this message rings and is always there. Thank you.
This is a really good way to end this session, because I think it underlines, again, we are all in this together, Ukrainian journalists and foreign journalists. I feel I should apologize for some of the behavior of foreign journalists, and I hope your experiences have been good, but we have benefited enormously from the writing, from the assistance, from the advice, from the bravery of Ukrainian journalists, and we can only wish you well. We're so happy you made it to Vienna. I know you're going to feel that you should stay inside, but I think all of us would say, please enjoy this beautiful city. It's here for, that would be the the best contribution to journalism is that you breathe, And I want to thank all of you for joining us. And please come and see Katya, Sergel, and Olga. You're going to be here for the 2 days? Yes. You're going to the ball? No. Oh, the ball. Get them on your dance card. Thank you very much.